Anna, May Carter grew up in a house where silence hurt more than shouting. Her stepmother's voice carried sharp as broken glass, each word meant to remind Anna May she was unwanted. The woman resented the brightness of her laughter, the way her singing could turn a dull afternoon into something alive. Her father, worn down by years in the mill and too weary to fight, let the cruelty stand. He never stepped between them, never lifted his hand or voice to shield her. In that shotgun house near the edge of the parish, Anna May learned what it meant to live unseen, unheard. But she was not a girl who broke easily. Her spirit, though pressed down, still sparked in moments of laughter when she could steal them. Sometimes she sang low while scrubbing floors, her voice like a secret prayer. Yet each note risked punishment, and soon even her songs became something she folded tight and hid away. When Virgil Crowther came calling, no one knew his history. He appeared one cold winter, a stranger with a dark beard and a gaze that revealed nothing but weight. His boots carried the swamp mud of places farther than anyone cared to walk, and his money, real, tangible bills, spoke louder than the questions people should have asked. He told her father he lived upriver, past the gas stations, past the last store where anyone might stop for bread or nails, out where the road dissolved into dirt and cypress roots. He wanted a wife, he said, someone hardworking, quiet, steady. He had a boy that needed minding. Her father glanced at the envelope on the table, heavy with cash. He didn't ask where it came from. He didn't look at Anna May when he said this was for the best. The stepmother smirked, her relief naked as sunlight, as though she'd shed a burden at last. Anna May's heart folded in on itself. She had no say, no path to refuse. She packed what little she owned, the threadbare dress, the comb her mother once left behind, and kept her chin steady. If this was escape from the bitterness of Sycamore Street, then so be it. Somewhere deep inside, she nursed the hope that perhaps, beyond the swamps and silence, she might find a life that was gentler. The road to Virgil's house grew narrower with each mile. Trees pressed close, their limbs dripping Spanish moss like gray curtains hiding whatever lay beyond. Cypress knees jutted up from the mud like the bones of old giants. The air smelled of water left too long in a jar, damp and heavy. By the time the wagon turned onto the last stretch, daylight had thinned to a weak gold, and Anna May saw the outline of a house rising out of the marshland. It was a grand house once, long ago, built when sugar money ran thick through the South. Now it sagged under time's weight. Boards warped, shutters leaned, paint peeled into flakes the color of ash. Yet it stood solid, unyielding, its porch wide enough to hold watch over the brown sweep of river just beyond the levee. Anna May stepped down, her boots sinking slightly into the wet earth. 3 large hounds rose from the shadows of a pen, their eyes catching the last of the light, yellow and sharp. They did not bark. They only stared, tails stiff, bodies taut, as though they measured her worth. Virgil called them off with a short whistle. Their silence was worse than noise. Inside, the air smelled of wood smoke and iron. No curtains softened the windows, no flowers sat in jars. The rooms were spare, neat, too clean, as if scoured of anything that might suggest warmth. Virgil's footsteps echoed heavy on the boards. He said little, only pointed out where she would sleep, where the boy stayed, what chores would be hers. Eli Crowther appeared in the doorway, a thin child with eyes too wide, too knowing for his years. He said nothing. He did not even move closer, only watched, a shadow of his father in miniature. Anna May's chest tightened, though she offered him the smallest of smiles. Later, as dusk deepened and the swamp grew loud with frogs and cicadas, Anna May stood on the porch. She breathed in the night air, thick and wet, and for a moment let a hum slip past her lips, soft and trembling. A tune she had carried since girlhood. Virgil's voice cut through it like a blade. No singing. The words struck harder than a slap. She turned, saw him standing behind her, eyes flat, the dogs restless in their pen. He stepped closer, lowering his tone until it pressed against her skin. "This house stays quiet." The swamp whispered around them. The river slid past in silence, and the dogs resumed their stillness. Anna May swallowed the song, folded it back into the quiet that had shaped her life. Somewhere inside, though, she clung to a small ember of hope. Perhaps the silence here would not swallow her whole. Perhaps in the stillness of the Louisiana night, she might yet carve a space to breathe. The days in Virgil Crowther's house soon folded into one another, like pages pressed too tightly together. The silence he demanded was not the silence of peace, but of a graveyard. Each morning he rose before dawn, his boots heavy on the wooden floorboards, and left without a word of where he went. When he was home, his presence filled the house like storm clouds, dark, unpredictable, waiting to break. Anna May learned quickly that even the softest hum, the smallest sound of comfort, could draw his anger. One evening, as she bent over the wash basin, a tune slipped out of her, barely a breath, barely music at all. Virgil's chair scraped the floor behind her, the sound harsh as steel. He didn't shout this time. He only stood, eyes narrowing, lips pressed tight. The message was clear. She stopped mid-note, hands shaking in the suds. From then on, she guarded her voice as carefully as a secret. His temper was a living thing, striking without warning. Once, when a loose shutter rattled in the wind, he stormed through the hall and slammed it shut so violently the frame splintered. Another time, when Eli tripped and spilled a cup of water, Virgil's roar filled the house like thunder. The boy froze, wide-eyed, shoulders hunched as if bracing for a blow. Though Virgil did not strike him then, the rage that poured out left the air scarred for hours. Eli himself was a strange, quiet shadow of a child. His hair stuck to his forehead in the damp, his thin frame swallowed by shirts too large. He followed Anna May with his eyes, but his lips never parted to form words. She tried at first to coax a sound, but the boy only shrank back, fear plain as daylight. Virgil had forbidden speech, had carved silence into the very walls. "The boy's fine as he is," he told her, his voice sharp. "No talk in this house. None." But when Virgil was gone, and he often was, Anna May dared to break that rule. She would sit with Eli on the floor, spreading cornmeal across a board, tracing letters into the grain. Her finger drew simple shapes, A for apple, E for Eli. The boy's eyes followed every stroke, curious, trembling. Sometimes she whispered words, soft as lullabies, and hummed old songs from her childhood. At first, he only listened, head cocked like a sparrow. Then, slowly, he began to mimic, his small hand following hers through the cornmeal. A murmur, no louder than the rustle of leaves, formed on his lips. It was not much, but to Anna May it was a spark in the darkness. Those stolen moments were the only warmth in the house. Outside, the swamp sang with frogs and cicadas. Inside, Anna May tried to teach a boy to claim his own voice. She knew if Virgil discovered it, his wrath would fall on them both. Yet she could not stop. To let the boy grow in silence seemed crueler than any punishment. There were other shadows, too, hints that something in Virgil's life was not as it seemed. He kept no garden, no hens in the yard, no hogs in the pen. The smokehouse stood empty, the fields behind the house lay bare. He hunted now and then, but never enough to feed them long. And yet, week after week, the pantry never emptied. He returned from his absences with sacks of flour, meat, coffee, always paid for in cash. The bills were worn, old, sometimes stained, and he tucked them into a locked chest he kept close at hand. Anna May asked once, lightly, where he managed to buy supplies so far from town. His gaze snapped to hers, flat and cold, and she felt the answer die on her tongue. "You mind the house," he said. "You mind the boy. I'll mind the rest." She never asked again. But in the quiet hours, as Eli traced shaky letters in the cornmeal and the swamp wind pressed against the shutters, Anna May wondered. Where did the money come from? Why did Virgil guard it so closely, like a man guarding not just his fortune, but his very life? The thought gnawed at her, though she kept it locked inside. At night, when Virgil's footsteps echoed heavy through the house, she lay awake listening to the dogs outside. Their low growls rose and fell in the dark, a chorus of watchmen guarding secrets she had not yet uncovered. She pulled the thin quilt over Eli's small body and prayed her whispers had not been overheard. The silence of that house was no longer emptiness, it was a cage. And in that cage, both she and the boy lived under Virgil's shadow, each day hoping for a crack of light. Virgil left before dawn, his boots thudding down the porch steps, the dogs whining low as he set off upriver. He said nothing of when he would return. The sound of his wagon faded into the cypress dark, leaving Anna May with Eli and the long stretch of silence that filled every corner of the house. At first, the day passed quietly. She swept the rooms, stirred the fire, and let Eli play with a small block of wood on the floor. With Virgil gone, the air felt lighter, almost breathable. She even allowed herself a tune, soft and low, while kneading dough. Eli's eyes lit up at the sound, his lips twitching as if he wanted to catch the melody. She smiled at him, whispering the words as if they were secrets meant only for the two of them. But as the light drained from the swamp and the shadows grew long, unease settled over the house. The wind whistled through the shutters, carrying the smell of wet earth. The dogs outside shifted restlessly in their pen, growling at nothing Anna May could see. She tried to calm Eli with supper, but he ate in silence, eyes darting toward the dark windows. Night deepened, heavy and slow. The fire popped in the hearth, its light flickering across the bare walls. Anna May had just begun to think of bed when Eli stiffened. His small body froze, spoon halfway to his mouth, eyes fixed on the window. "What is it, baby?" she whispered, but the words felt brittle in the air. She followed his gaze. At first there was only darkness pressed against the glass, thick as tar. Then movement, something shifting just beyond the pane. A shadow, quick, too close. Anna May's breath caught. The dogs erupted, snarling, their paws thudding against the wood of the pen. Eli whimpered, sliding from his chair, pressing himself against her skirts. Anna May rose, her hands trembling as she reached for the shotgun propped against the wall. Virgil had left it loaded. She stood in the middle of the room, heart hammering. The window stared back at her, blank now, only her reflection shimmering in the firelight. She told herself it was nothing. Branches swaying, swamp mist curling too thick. But the weight in her chest said otherwise. Someone had been there, watching. The night stretched into hours. She did not dare close her eyes. With Eli curled against her lap, she sat rigid on the bench, the shotgun across her knees. Every creak of the house, every sigh of the wind pressed into her nerves. She heard crunching outside, faint like footsteps in wet earth. Once, she thought she heard a knock, so soft it might have been her imagination. But Eli stirred at the sound too, clutching her arm, and she knew it was real. The fire burned low. The shadows thickened. Her body ached from stillness, but she did not move. She prayed silently, words tumbling in her head without form. The boy slept fitfully, twitching against her side. When the first gray threads of dawn began to slip through the shutters, relief washed over her so strong she nearly wept. The world outside looked innocent in daylight. Mist curled low over the ground, and the river glinted dull pewter under the pale sky. Anna May stepped onto the porch, Eli's hand gripping hers tight. The dogs whined, exhausted from a night of pacing, their eyes bloodshot. She scanned the yard, heart still racing. At first, she saw nothing unusual. Then her gaze dropped to the earth near the steps. There, imprinted clearly in the damp soil, were footprints. Not boots, not shoes, bare feet, small, narrow, as if a child had walked through the night with nothing to shield them from the cold ground. The tracks led toward the window where Eli had first stared, then curved away into the cypress gloom. Anna May's breath hitched. Her mind scrambled for reason. Perhaps neighborhood children, though none lived this far out. Perhaps hunters, though what hunter would go barefoot in the swamp at night? None of it made sense. Eli tugged at her skirt, eyes wide, silent. He too had seen them. She backed slowly into the house, bolting the door behind her. The sight of those prints stayed etched in her mind, sharper than any nightmare. For the rest of the morning, she moved through her chores in a fog, listening for sounds she could not name. There was no denying it now. The night had left more than fear. It had left proof that something, or someone, walked the grounds unseen. The house had always been quiet. Now it felt haunted. That night the dream came heavy, pressing down on Anna May's chest like a weight she could not lift. She saw the swamp under a white veil, the cypress trees bone pale in moonlight. And there, at the edge of the clearing, stood a woman. Her hair was long, the color of embers, catching the light as though each strand burned. She wore a white dress that shifted in the cold wind, thin fabric clinging to her narrow frame. The woman's face was hollow, unreadable, but her hand rose slowly, deliberately, and pointed into the dark woods. Anna May tried to call out, but her voice failed her. The woman's lips did not move, yet the silence spoke. That finger, rigid as a command, directed her gaze toward the deepest part of the swamp, a place where even the dogs would not roam. She jolted awake, her body slick with sweat, though the night air was damp and cold. For a moment she thought it was only the dream lingering in her bones. But then Eli stirred beside her, restless, as if he too had been touched by something unseen. Morning came gray and heavy. Anna May went out to fetch water, her hands still trembling from the vision. The mist clung to the yard, curling around the porch posts like fingers. And there, caught on the low branch of a cypress tree, was a shred of fabric. She froze. The cloth was pale, weathered, fluttering in the breeze. Her mind flashed back to the dream, the white dress, the way it clung to the red-haired figure. The fabric on the branch was torn, ragged, yet it was the same ghost-white hue. Anna May crossed herself without thinking, her breath quick and shallow. She plucked the cloth free and held it in her hands, her heart drumming as though she'd stolen something forbidden. It smelled faintly of damp earth, of rot, of years lost in the swamp. Inside, Virgil sat at the table, his hands wrapped around a cup of black coffee. His eyes lifted to the scrap in her hand, and for the first time she saw something flicker across his face. Not surprise, not fear, but irritation, like a man interrupted in thought. "What's this?" Anna May asked softly, though the answer already burned inside her. He set the cup down hard enough that the liquid spilled over the rim. "Lillian," he said flatly, "my first wife." The name hung in the air, sharp as broken glass. Anna May felt her blood turn cold. Virgil leaned back, his gaze fixed on her in a way that made her skin crawl. She wandered into the woods one winter, lost her way, froze to death. That's all. His tone brooked no questions, final as a nailed coffin. But Anna May could not stop the shiver that ran through her. The dream, the pointing finger, the fabric that matched the dress. None of it felt like coincidence. She stared at the scrap in her hand, the weave fraying between her fingers, and thought of a woman whose voice had been smothered by the same silence, now choking her. She glanced at Eli. The boy sat at the edge of the table, his eyes dark, fixed on the cloth as though he recognized it. His mother's dress, his mother's ghost. Anna May pressed the fabric flat against the table, her breath quickening. She wanted to ask more, wanted to know how a woman could vanish in woods she had walked all her life, how she could leave behind nothing but silence and a child forbidden to speak. But Virgil's glare pinned her in place. His jaw flexed, his hand tightening around the coffee cup until it seemed it might shatter. "Don't bring her up again," he said, his voice low, dangerous. Anna May nodded, though her heart rebelled. The cloth lay between them like a curse, a warning carried from the grave. She folded it carefully, hid it away in her apron pocket, and said no more. But inside her the dread grew. She thought of Lillian's face in the dream, pale and hollow, the finger pointing into the darkness. She thought of the footprints outside the window, bare and small, too human to be beast, too strange to belong to any living soul. And for the first time, Anna May understood what it meant to fear not only her husband, but the house itself, the land itself. If Lillian's ghost was calling to her, it was not out of malice. It was a warning, and warnings meant danger. As she lay awake that night, listening to the dogs shift restlessly and the swamp wind sigh against the walls, Anna May realized a truth that made her blood run colder than any winter storm. If she stayed, she might share Lillian's fate. Virgil came home drunk one night, the kind of drunk that loosened his tongue and turned his eyes glassy with madness. He staggered through the door, the dogs barking as though they, too, felt the storm rolling in. He dropped himself into the chair by the table, the smell of whiskey filling the room, and began to mutter. At first it was the usual, grumbling about the neighbors upriver, though none existed, cursing at debts no one had asked about. But then his words shifted, slippery with liquor, tumbling out into the open like stones he had tried too long to keep buried. Lillian, he slurred, the name thick on his tongue. Thought she could talk back to me, thought she could sing her fool songs. He laughed, a low, bitter sound that chilled Anna May where she stood. I showed her. I put her out. One night, dead of winter. Just her and the cold. She never came back. He said it as though it were nothing, as though sending a woman to her death was no more than tossing out yesterday's scraps. His eyes gleamed with a kind of pride, and his fist slammed the table hard enough to rattle the plates. Anna May felt the blood drain from her face. She had heard whispers in his anger, caught shadows of the truth, but to hear it spoken plain was something else. He had not lost his wife. He had killed her with cruelty sharpened by drink and rage. And now Anna May lived under the same roof, bound to the same silence, and she knew, if his wrath turned fully on her, she would end the same way. That night she barely slept. Even when the bottle dragged him into unconsciousness, his words crawled through her mind like a fever. She lay stiff beside Eli, listening to the child's breathing, wondering how much he remembered of that night, how much his silence carried. The next day, with Virgil gone again, she busied herself with chores, trying to drive away the dread. She swept the floors, pushed back the heavy bench by the table, and bent low to scrub at the planks. That was when she noticed it, boards that did not sit flush with the others. They shifted slightly under her weight, as though something lay hidden beneath. Her heart thumped in her chest. She hesitated, then pried at the edge with the knife she carried for peeling vegetables. The board lifted easily, revealing a dark space beneath. She leaned down, eyes wide. There, half buried in dust, sat an old iron pot, and inside it gold, coins stacked, dull but unmistakable, their surfaces catching what little light slipped through the cracks. Dozens, maybe hundreds of them, enough to explain the sacks of food, the steady stream of cash. Anna May's breath caught. She reached out, almost without meaning to, fingers brushing the cold metal. A chill ran through her, sharp and unnatural, as though the pot itself recoiled at her touch. She pulled back quickly, her pulse hammering. It made sense now. Why Virgil never farmed, never hunted more than he pleased. Why he guarded the house so fiercely. The gold was his lifeblood, his secret. But with it came something else, something that darkened him, sharpened his anger into something monstrous. That night, the signs grew stronger. Eli stirred in his sleep, whispering sounds too soft to be words. The dogs paced restlessly in their pen, hackles raised though nothing stirred in the yard. Anna May lay awake, and through the thin slats of the shutters, she swore she saw movement again, a pale shadow gliding past, the shape of a woman lingering at the edge of the trees. In the silence that followed, there came a sound. Faint footsteps across the porch. She held her breath, clutching Eli close, listening. The boards creaked as though someone barefoot walked inches from where she lay. Then nothing. Morning revealed no visitor, only more prints in the damp earth. Bare, small, pressed deep into the mud as if by a foot colder than ice. They trailed from the porch to the tree line and vanished into the cypress. Anna May's hands shook as she traced the marks with her eyes. The dream, the fabric, Virgil's drunken confession, the hidden gold, each piece folded into the next, painting a picture she could no longer deny. The past was not buried here. It walked, it watched, and it waited. And she knew now, more than ever, that the curse binding Virgil Crowther's house did not come only from his fists or his rage. It came from the gold hidden beneath the floorboards, a treasure rotting his soul from within, feeding on him until he was more monster than man. Anna May turned her gaze toward the swamp, where the mist curled heavy and gray. She thought of Lillian pointing in her dream, warning her, begging her to see. The danger was no longer in shadows. It was here, in the very bones of the house. And if she stayed, she would not only live under Virgil's cruelty, she would inherit the same fate as the woman who had come before her. Virgil returned before dusk, his boots pounding against the porch as though the house itself had offended him. Anna May felt her chest tighten the moment he crossed the threshold. His eyes were wild, darting, his breath ragged. The dogs in the pen howled, sensing the storm before she could. He didn't remove his coat, didn't sit. Instead, his gaze swept the floor with a feverish intensity. Then it landed on the boards she had touched. "You," he barked, voice cracked with rage. "You been in my things." Anna May froze, her hands trembling around the pot she held. "No," she whispered. "I haven't touched. Don't lie to me." His roar filled the room, shaking the thin walls. He strode forward, looming over her, the smell of whiskey and swamp clinging to him. His eyes burned, and for the first time she understood that he wasn't only angry, he was afraid. "You touched my money," he hissed, spit flying, his face so close she could feel the heat of his fury. "You went where you weren't meant to. If you took even one coin," he slammed his fist against the wall, the sound like a gunshot, "I'll kill you where you stand." Eli whimpered from the corner, his small body shrinking into the shadows. Virgil's head snapped toward the sound, and his rage deepened. "Even the boy knows. You've ruined everything." Anna May's heart pounded. She knew there was no reasoning with him now. She could see it in his eyes. He had crossed into that place where fury left no room for mercy. He lunged, his hands reaching for her throat. Instinct took over. Anna May shoved the chair between them and snatched Eli into her arms. "Run," she gasped, though the word never fully left her lips. She bolted for the door. Virgil roared behind her, the crash of wood splitting as he overturned the table in his fury. She threw the bolt, yanked the door wide, and plunged into the night with Eli clutched tight against her chest. The swamp air was sharp with cold, mist rising from the riverbank. Anna May's feet struck mud and root, her lungs burning as she ran. Behind her came the crash of footsteps, heavy and relentless, and then, worse, the release of the hounds. Their baying split the night, low and hungry. Eli buried his face into her shoulder, sobbing soundlessly. She stumbled forward, heart breaking at the thought that the boy's last memory might be of this flight. Then she saw them, prints in the mud, faint but clear, bare feet, small, leading into the dark woods. The same she had seen at dawn, the same that haunted her dreams. With no other path, she followed, praying that whatever spirit left them would not lead her into ruin. The hounds closed in, their snarls vibrating through the trees. Anna May stumbled, clutching Eli, bracing for teeth and claws. But when the dogs burst through the underbrush, something unexplainable happened. They didn't attack. They circled her and the boy, their eyes glowing in the moonlight, teeth bared, not at her, but at the darkness behind. Their bodies formed a wall between her and Virgil's pursuit, growls rumbling like thunder. One pressed its flank against her leg, nudging her forward, urging her on. Anna May's breath caught. For a moment, she thought she saw something beyond the dogs, a pale figure at the tree line, hair the color of flame, lifting an arm to point deeper into the swamp. Virgil's voice held in the distance, curses tearing through the night. The dogs answered with barks sharp as gunfire, driving him back. Anna May stumbled onward, Eli clinging to her neck, her legs sinking in mud and roots. The prince glowed faint in the moonlight, guiding her step by step. The swamp that had once felt like a prison now became her only hope. And though fear twisted her stomach, a sliver of belief rooted itself inside her. She was not running alone. Something beyond flesh and blood was leading her, guarding her, turning Virgil's own hounds against him. The night was heavy, the path treacherous, but Anna May no longer felt only terror. She felt the faintest pulse of defiance of life. For the first time since stepping into Virgil Crowther's house, she believed she might escape. The swamp seemed endless. Roots rose like claws from the mud. Water pooled black between the cypress knees, and every step Anna May took threatened to drag her down. Eli clung to her neck, his small body heavy against her chest, his silent tears dampening her shoulder. Her lungs burned, but she pressed forward, each stride fueled by the terror of Virgil's roar echoing somewhere behind them. The dogs flanked her like guardians, their bodies weaving through the dark underbrush. They growled at the night, their hackles raised toward the direction of pursuit, but not once did they turn on her. The sight of them, Virgil's own beasts turned protectors, was both terrifying and miraculous. The prints in the mud pulled her deeper, bare feet leading toward some unseen salvation. Moonlight cut slivers through the moss-draped branches, just enough to keep her from stumbling blind. Still, roots snagged her skirt, branches clawed her arms, and once she nearly fell face first into a pool of stagnant water. She bit down on her fear, clutched Eli tighter and pressed on. Then came the river, wide, sluggish in the summer, but now half-skinned with thin plates of ice that cracked like breaking bones when the dogs stepped near. Mist crawled across its surface, hiding its true depth. Anna May's heart sank. To cross it was madness. To stay meant death. Virgil's voice carried faintly through the trees, closer now, a string of curses that seemed to seep into the very fog. Eli whimpered, clutching her tighter. She looked to the tree line, desperate, and there, just beyond the mist, she saw her. Lillian. The red hair gleamed like fire in moonlight, her white dress stirring though there was no wind. She stood on the far bank, silent, her arm extended, finger pointing, not accusing but beckoning. Come. Anna May's knees buckled. For a heartbeat, she thought her mind had broken under fear. But then Eli's head lifted from her shoulder, his eyes wide, and she knew he saw too. The child did not speak, but his tiny hand reached toward the vision, as though toward a mother he half remembered. The ice groaned under her first step, splintering beneath her boots. She moved carefully, clutching Eli high, whispering prayers under her breath. The dogs padded onto the frozen surface, their weight steady, their eyes never leaving hers. Step by step they crossed. The ice cracked, water rising through jagged seams. At one point her leg plunged knee-deep into the river's freezing grip, and she nearly lost her balance. Eli cried out without sound, his small fingers digging into her shoulder. "Hold on, baby!" she gasped, dragging herself free, pushing forward despite the fire of cold burning her limbs. Behind them came the thrash of pursuit. Virgil's shadow moved along the riverbank, his lantern swinging wild. His curses cut through the night, demanding obedience, demanding the return of what he had claimed. But the swamp would not give them back. At last her boots struck solid ground. The ice behind her groaned in one final protest before shattering under Virgil's weight. His lantern swung. His shout ripped through the fog, but she did not look back. She ran, the dogs bounding at her side, Eli clinging like a second heartbeat against her chest. Hours blurred into one another. The swamp seemed determined to keep them, to twist their path into circles. But always, just at the corner of her sight, she glimpsed the pale shape of Lillian's dress, guiding her forward. Once, when she faltered from exhaustion, she felt the brush of something cool against her hand, urging her to rise again. By the time dawn bled into the sky, Anna May stumbled out of the trees and onto a dirt road. Her legs shook, her body bruised. But ahead lay the outline of cabins, small houses clustered around a chapel steeple, smoke curling from chimneys. She nearly collapsed, but the dogs pressed against her legs, steadying her. Eli raised his head, his wide eyes taking in the sight of people moving about. Real people, not shadows. For the first time in days, his face softened. A woman hurried toward them, skirts lifted from the mud, her hair dark and streaked with gray. She looked from Anna May to Eli, her eyes widening with recognition. "Lord have mercy," she whispered, her voice catching. "That's Lillian's boy." Anna May swayed, unsure whether she stood in safety or deeper danger. But the woman reached out, steadying her arm. "I'm Clara May Johnson," she said softly. "Lillian was my sister. You're safe now." The words struck Anna May like a benediction. Her knees gave way, and for the first time since fleeing the house by the river, she let herself weep. Clara May Johnson's cabin was warm with the smell of wood smoke and herbs drying from the rafters. After days of swamp chill, the air itself felt like a blessing. Anna May sat near the fire, Eli curled against her side, while Clara May poured steaming cups of chicory coffee. Her hands were steady, but her eyes, dark and searching, rarely left the boy. "That's Lillian's child," Clara May said at last, her voice low. "I'd know those eyes anywhere." She touched Eli's hair with trembling fingers. "My sister's boy. Anna may know that." The boy pressed closer into her arm, wary of the stranger, but did not resist her touch. Clara May sank into a chair across from them, her gaze heavy with memory. "You don't have to tell me what happened," she continued. "I know Virgil. I know what he became." Anna May's throat tightened. She wanted to speak, but the words clung like thorns. Clara May seemed to sense her silence and filled it with her own. "It started with that cursed gold," Clara May said, staring into the fire. "Virgil found it years ago, digging near the old levee where the Spanish once buried their plunder. People said the land was marked, that treasure left in the swamp carried the devil's breath. But Virgil, he wouldn't listen. He took it all, brought it into the house, thought it would buy him power, freedom." Her eyes darkened. What it bought was madness. He grew secretive, hard, like something hollowed him out. Lillian, she tried to reach him. She begged him to leave it, to burn it, to walk away. But he clung tighter, and when her voice rose against him, when she sang, when she dreamed of taking Eli and leaving, he turned cruel. He said she was cursed, that her very presence threatened his hold. And one winter's night, Clara May's voice faltered. He put her out, let the cold finish what his fists would not. Anna May's breath caught, her heart hammering against her ribs. It was the story she had feared, spoken now with the weight of truth. Clara May looked at Eli again, tears shining in her eyes. "Before she died, Lillian told me something. She said if the swamp took her, she wouldn't leave her boy alone. She swore she'd find a way back to him, even if only as a shadow." The words struck Anna May like a tremor through her bones. The dreams, the footprints, the pale figure at the river. All of it came rushing back. She understood now. It wasn't madness or chance. Lillian's spirit had walked beside her, guiding her steps, shielding Eli when no one else could. She bowed her head, clutching Eli to her chest. He tilted his face up, silent but searching, and she pressed her lips to his hair. "Your mama never left you," she whispered, though her voice cracked. "She led us here." Clara May nodded slowly, her face etched with sorrow and resolve. "Virgil won't let go easy. He's bound to that gold. Bound and damned. He'll come hunting when he realizes you slipped free. But we won't let him take Eli. Not while I breathe." Anna May met her gaze across the fire, two women bound now by more than blood or marriage. Bound by the promise to protect a child marked by both curse and love. Outside, the swamp wind rattled the shutters, as though reminding them the danger was not yet gone. Anna May's shoulders stiffened. The fear inside her had not vanished, but it had changed shape. It was no longer the helpless dread of a woman trapped in silence. It was sharper now, steadier, the fear of a mother who would fight. She looked at Eli, then back at Clara May. "He won't take him back," she said firmly. "Not while I'm here." The fire popped, sending sparks upward. Clara May laid a hand on her arm, strong and sure. "Then we'll be ready." That night, as Anna May lay in a bed softer than she had known in years, she did not dream of Lillian's hollow face. Instead, she dreamt of her standing tall in the clearing, hair blazing, pointing the way not into darkness but towards safety. For the first time, Anna May woke with the sense that perhaps she had a chance, not only to survive, but to break the cycle that had claimed the woman before her. Virgil Crowther never came to the village. Days passed, then weeks, and though Anna May's heart clenched with dread at every sound beyond the treeline, his shadow never appeared. The swamp itself seemed to swallow him, as if the land had decided it was finished with him. Word reached the village one gray morning. A trapper had found him deep in the cypress woods, sitting upright against a tree, his lantern extinguished at his side. His body was stiff, eyes wide open, frost clinging to his beard though the night had not been cold enough to kill a man. The dogs that had once served him lay scattered around, silent and still, their breaths long extinguished. The description chilled Anna May. Virgil's pose was too familiar, his back braced, his body hardened by the elements, his face frozen into an expression of disbelief. It mirrored what Clara May had once whispered about Lillian, that they had found her the same way, alone in the winter swamp, as if life had left her in mid-breath. Only this time there was no mystery, no accident. Anna May felt it in her bones. His end had not come from hunger or weather or fate. It was something older, deeper, the same force that had led her through the swamp, that had left footprints in the mud, that had guarded Eli when no one else would. The curse he had carried, the blood on his hands, had finally claimed him. Justice, in its own quiet and merciless form, had arrived. The villagers buried him in the far edge of the swamp without ceremony. No one spoke words over the grave. No one marked the spot with stone or cross. The swamp closed around it, moss creeping, water rising, as if erasing him from memory. For Anna May, life began to take on a rhythm she had never known. Clara May welcomed her into the cabin as though she were kin, and the small village wrapped itself around Eli with a gentleness he had never tasted. For the first time, the boy laughed, an awkward, halting sound that burst out one afternoon when other children pulled him into a game near the chapel yard. Anna May wept quietly at the sound, for it was proof that silence did not own him forever. Eli began to speak, words first broken, then stronger, as though each syllable carried him further from his father's shadow. He learned the names of the children who played with him, called Clara May Andy, and, when Anna May least expected it, whispered Mama into her ear as he clung to her side. The word was hesitant, but it rooted deep inside her. Anna May, too, found a new kind of peace. She sang again, softly at first, her voice trembling as though afraid to be heard. But no hand struck her down, no voice silenced her. The songs grew stronger, weaving through the cabin, filling it with a warmth that neither curse nor cruelty could snuff out. Sometimes, when she walked with Eli along the road, she thought she felt eyes upon her. Not the heavy gaze of Virgil, but something gentler. Once, on a still morning, she saw a white bird lift from the trees near the riverbank. Its wings gleamed in the sun, and for a moment its flight traced the same motion as a hand pointing the way. Her heart swelled. She knew then that Lillian had found rest. The promise she had made to never leave her child alone had been fulfilled. She had guided them through terror and shadow, delivered them into safety. And now, with Eli laughing, with Anna May singing, her spirit could lift free. Life in the village was not grand. Days were filled with chores, chopping wood, drawing water, mending clothes. But the quiet here was not suffocating. It was the quiet of peace, not of fear. Anna May carried that peace carefully, as though it were treasure more precious than any gold hidden in the earth. On an afternoon washed in soft sunlight, she stood outside Clara May's cabin, watching Eli chase after the other children, his laughter rising bright against the steady hum of cicadas. She closed her eyes, breathed deep, and felt the weight of her past finally loosen. The swamp had taken much from her, but it had also given her back a life reshaped and reclaimed. High above, the white bird circled once before vanishing into the blue. Anna May lifted her gaze, and a smile broke across her face. The future stretched open like a field after storm, tender and waiting. At last she was free.
The world keeps turning, and with each turn comes a new story. When one door closes, another opens, leading us into a journey entirely different. Let us set aside the echoes of the tale just past and step together into a new realm where another destiny awaits to be told. And now I invite you to listen to the second story, a path of its own, unrelated to what came before, yet filled with mysteries and surprises meant only for those willing to journey onward with me.
My name is Megan Whitaker, and for most of my 32 years, I thought I had life figured out. I had a husband, Brian, who I believed was my partner in everything, and our little girl, Lily, who had just turned 5. After 6 years of marriage, I still woke up some mornings with the feeling that I had won the lottery, an ordinary, suburban kind of happiness that felt unshakable. We lived in a quiet neighborhood on the edge of Madison, Wisconsin, in a modest house with a white porch railing and a maple tree out front that turned a fiery orange each fall. It was the kind of place where people waved when they drove past, where kids biked in circles on the cul-de-sac until dusk, and where neighbors borrowed sugar without hesitation. To me, it was the picture of stability, the kind of life I had always wanted. Most days followed the same rhythm. I worked part-time at a local design shop, and the rest of my time was spent taking care of Lily, planning meals, and keeping our home in order. On summer mornings, I would pack her little pink backpack with swimsuits, coloring books, and her favorite stuffed rabbit before dropping her off at my parents' lake cabin just outside town. They loved having her for weekends, and she adored those trips, canoeing with my dad, baking cookies with my mom, staying up later than she ever could at home. For me, it was a chance to catch my breath, sometimes even to enjoy a quiet weekend alone with Brian. We also had our own ritual. Almost every Friday, Brian would suggest driving out to Lake Mendota. We didn't own a cabin, but we'd rent a small spot for the weekend or join friends at theirs. Lily would run through the tall grass barefoot, her laughter carrying across the water, while Brian grilled hot dogs and I set out paper plates on the picnic table. Those moments felt like snapshots of a perfect family life, the kind of memories I wanted to hold on to forever. I trusted Brian completely. He worked in sales at a local firm, which sometimes meant late nights or dinners with clients, but I never questioned it. He had always been attentive, the kind of father who built Lego castles on the living room floor, and the kind of husband who remembered to buy my favorite coffee creamer when he went grocery shopping. I told myself that was love, the little things, steady and dependable. Still, if I'm honest, there had been small changes. Nothing glaring, nothing that screamed betrayal, but subtle things I noticed without wanting to admit I noticed. He started going out more often, claiming he needed to blow off steam with colleagues. Some nights, he came home later than usual, smelling faintly of cologne he didn't wear around the house. When I asked how the evening went, he'd answer too quickly, as if rehearsed, and then change the subject by kissing Lily's forehead or asking what we'd had for dinner. At the time, I brushed it off. I told myself he was just stressed, that work was demanding, that men sometimes needed space the way women did. After all, hadn't he earned that trust? Hadn't he proven over and over that he was a good man, a good husband, a good father? So I let those doubts settle like dust in the corners of my mind, barely noticeable, easy to ignore. I chose instead to focus on the sweetness of our little routines, the way Brian held Lily's tiny hand as they crossed the street, the way he winked at me over the dinner table, the way our house always smelled of fresh laundry and apple pie. It was easier to believe in that version of our life, the safe one, the one where nothing could shatter. Back then, I had no idea how fragile that picture really was. It started with little things, moments that didn't seem worth holding on to, but that, in hindsight, carried more weight than I wanted to admit. Brian would tell me he was meeting some friends from work for drinks, and I didn't think twice. Why would I? He had always been social, always the kind of person who thrived around people. When he slipped on his jacket and kissed me on the cheek, I smiled and told him to have fun. Then I'd tuck Lily into bed and curl up with a book, never imagining he might be anywhere other than where he said he was. Later, I would learn that those nights weren't spent at the local sports bar like he claimed. They were dinners with Vanessa Moore, a young woman who had just joined his company, someone who laughed a little too loudly and leaned in a little too close. But at the time, I didn't know. At the time, I believed my husband. My trust in Brian was like second nature. I didn't question it, the way you don't question the sun rising each morning. He was my partner, my anchor, the man who had stood beside me through sleepless nights when Lily was a baby, who had painted her nursery yellow because he said it felt like sunshine. If he said he was out with friends, then that was the truth. At least, that's what I told myself. Around that same time, something else happened, something small, something ordinary. Our washing machine broke down one Friday afternoon. I remember standing in the laundry room, staring at the half-soaked clothes, frustration rising in my chest. With Brian out for the evening, I called my friend Claire to ask if she knew a repairman who could come by. She laughed and said, "You don't need a repairman, Megan. I'll send Daniel." Daniel was her older brother, a few years older than me, and he lived just a couple of streets away. I had met him briefly at barbecues and neighborhood gatherings, but we'd never really talked beyond polite greetings. Within an hour, he showed up at my door with a toolbox in hand, smiling politely. He worked on the machine while I tried to keep Lily entertained. After about 40 minutes of clanking and adjusting, he managed to get it running again. "You'll probably need a new part soon," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. "But this should hold for now." Grateful, I insisted he stay for dinner. I hadn't prepared anything fancy, just spaghetti with Jared sauce and a salad, but Daniel didn't seem to mind. We sat around the table, Lily chattering away about her day at preschool, and Daniel listening with genuine interest. He was quiet, thoughtful, the kind of man who didn't need to fill silences with unnecessary words. I didn't think much of it at the time. To me, it was just a neighbor helping out, a small kindness in a week that had felt unusually busy. But something about his presence lingered with me, not in a romantic way, but in a comforting one. He was steady, grounded, and in that moment, I appreciated the simplicity of it. When Brian came home later that night, he was cheerful, talkative, almost overly so. He asked what I'd made for dinner, teased Lily about staying up too late, kissed my forehead. I told him about the washing machine and how Daniel had helped. His expression flickered for just a second, something sharp in his eyes, but then he smiled and said, "That was nice of him." And just like that, the moment passed. I didn't see the tension for what it was. I didn't question where he had really been that evening. To me, our family was still solid, still whole, still the life I had built brick by brick. The cracks were there, yes, but they were hairline fractures, easy to overlook when you were too busy convincing yourself that everything was fine. There are nights that stay burned into your memory, not because you lived them, but because of what you later learned. At the time, I was folding Lily's clothes, humming absent-mindedly while she sat on the rug drawing pictures of flowers with her markers. Brian had told me he'd be late. Dinner with a couple of clients, he'd said as he straightened his tie by the mirror. I kissed him goodbye at the door, reminded him not to stay out too late, and that was it. That was all I knew. What I didn't know was where he really was that night. Only later did I learn about the restaurant downtown, the dim lighting, the way Vanessa leaned across the table, her hand brushing his as she laughed. She was younger, carefree, the kind of woman who looked at him like he was the center of the universe. They ordered wine, shared dessert, lingered long after the plates had been cleared. And when Brian paid the bill, they didn't go their separate ways. They went to her apartment. While I tucked Lily into bed and read her favorite story about the little rabbit who wanted to see the world, Brian was crossing a line that would unravel everything we had built. He was kissing someone else, convincing himself it was harmless, that it was just a moment, nothing more. He was betraying me in a way I wouldn't discover until much later. I look back on those nights and wonder how I could have been so blind. But the truth is, there was nothing unusual to notice, not then. Brian came home after midnight, smelling faintly of cologne and whiskey, his tie loosened, his voice a little too bright as he whispered that everything had gone well with his clients. I believed him. I wanted to believe him. I had no reason not to. The contrast still stings when I think about it. While I was brushing Lily's hair into braids for preschool the next morning, Brian was probably replaying the feel of another woman's lips. While I was planning what groceries to buy for the weekend, he was finding excuses to see her again. We were living under the same roof, sharing the same meals, but our realities had split into two completely different worlds. At the time, all I saw was my husband, a little tired from work, a little distracted maybe, but still the man who carried Lily on his shoulders at the county fair, who left sticky notes on the fridge telling me to have a good day. I didn't realize those notes were written by a man already living a double life. Sometimes I replay the details in my head, the sound of Lily's laughter in the bathtub, the way the house smelled of laundry detergent, the television humming softly in the background. My world was so ordinary, so safe, so untouched by suspicion. Meanwhile, his world was slipping further into shadows I couldn't see. I didn't know it then. How could I? All I had were the pieces of a picture that looked complete, even perfect. Only later would I discover the cracks hidden beneath the paint, the moments I hadn't lived, but that had changed the course of my marriage forever. Back then, I was just a wife who trusted her husband, a mother who believed her family was solid. He was the man I leaned on, the man I loved. And in those same moments, he was betraying me in ways I couldn't yet imagine. That was the truth of it, the brutal, quiet truth. That summer, we planned a weekend at Lake Mendota with a group of friends and family. It wasn't anything unusual. We had done it many times before. Claire organized most of it, making sure everyone brought food, blankets, folding chairs. I packed Lily's swimsuit and a picnic basket full of sandwiches, fruit, and cookies. She was practically bouncing with excitement, chattering the whole drive about swimming in the lake and roasting marshmallows at night. The day couldn't have been more perfect. The sun was warm but not unbearable, the water sparkling under a clear Wisconsin sky. Kids ran barefoot through the grass, tossing frisbees, while adults spread blankets and coolers under the shade of tall trees. Laughter carried across the shoreline, the kind of easy joy that made you forget for a while about bills, work, or any heaviness in life. I remember thinking how lucky I was. Brian set up the grill with a couple of the men, joking about who could cook the best burgers. Lily splashed near the shallow water with Claire, squealing every time a wave touched her toes. I sat on the blanket, pouring lemonade into paper cups, feeling like everything was exactly as it should be. It wasn't until later that I noticed Brian's mood shift. At first, he was laughing along with everyone else, holding a beer in one hand, flipping hot dogs with the other. Then his smile faltered. His eyes fixed on someone across the picnic area, and a tension settled in his shoulders. I followed his gaze, but didn't think much of it. There were new faces among the group, friends of friends, people I hadn't met before. Claire's cousin had brought a few coworkers, and someone else had invited a neighbor. It was normal for these gatherings to feel a little larger each year. What I didn't know, what I couldn't know, was that one of those new faces was Vanessa Moore. She had come with a friend, blending easily into the crowd, laughing too brightly, her eyes scanning the group until they landed on Brian. I didn't see the way his expression froze, how he quickly looked away, pretending to focus on the grill. I didn't catch the flicker of recognition in her eyes when she spotted him. All I saw was Brian looking a little distracted, a little distant, but I assumed it was nothing. Maybe he was just tired, maybe he was thinking about work. That's what I told myself. The truth was different. Later, when I looked back on that day, I realized the undercurrent had been there all along. The way Brian's laugh sounded forced, the way he avoided standing too close to where Vanessa was sitting, as if distance could erase history. The way his eyes darted quickly whenever she moved, checking if anyone had noticed. At the time, though, I was oblivious. I poured him a drink, kissed his cheek, and went back to helping Lily build a sandcastle near the water's edge. To me, it was just another beautiful summer day, full of sunshine, family, and the simple happiness of being together. But beneath that calm surface, something fragile had already begun to splinter. And though I didn't see it then, Brian's forced smiles and uneasy glances were the first cracks in what I thought was still a perfect picture. When I think back on that weekend at Lake Mendota, what stands out most isn't what I saw, it's what I didn't see. The hours I spent laughing with Lily, helping her gather wildflowers by the water, felt so ordinary, so safe. But in those same moments, something else was happening just beyond my sight. Brian slipped away. He told one of the guys he needed to stretch his legs, maybe grab more firewood. No one questioned it. He wandered toward the line of trees bordering the picnic area, and not long after, Vanessa followed. They thought they were invisible, two people who had crossed a line long ago, now stealing time where they could. Later, Claire would tell me how she had gone into the woods to find a quiet spot to take a call. She wasn't looking for anything, just a moment away from the noise. That's when she saw them, Brian and Vanessa, standing too close, their heads bent together, the unmistakable intimacy of people who shouldn't be touching. Claire froze, heart racing. She pulled out her phone almost instinctively, hands trembling as she pressed record. She said later she didn't even know why she filmed it. Maybe because she knew I deserved the truth. Maybe because she needed proof, something undeniable, before she could bring herself to tell me. All I know is that her phone captured what my eyes didn't see. Brian leaning in, kissing Vanessa as if he belonged to her, as if our 6 years of marriage and the child we shared didn't exist. While Claire was standing there, torn between shock and anger, I was by the lake with Lily. She was showing me a rock shaped like a heart, her little fingers wet from the water. I laughed, kissed her forehead, and tucked the rock into her pocket so she could keep it as a treasure. My world was full of sunlight, laughter, and innocence. His was hidden in shadows, built on lies. Claire told me she wrestled with what to do in that moment. Should she storm back and tell me immediately, rip the curtain down on the life I believed in? Should she confront Brian herself, force him to stop? Or should she wait, give herself time to figure out the right way to break my heart? She stood there, torn, her phone clutched tightly in her hand, while I sat just yards away, completely unaware. Brian must have thought he was careful. He returned to the picnic not long after, carrying a few sticks of firewood, his face flushed but his smile forced. Vanessa slipped back separately, laughing too loudly at something someone said, as if noise could cover guilt. Claire kept her distance, her eyes on me, her lips pressed tight. I didn't notice any of it. I was too busy helping Lily spread a blanket, pouring lemonade into cups, listening to her giggle as she ran barefoot through the grass. To me, it was another summer afternoon, another memory I thought would one day be sweet. I had no idea that in the very same moment, another memory was being created, one that would shatter me when it finally reached me. Looking back, I sometimes wonder if I should have felt it, if some part of me should have sensed the betrayal already unfolding in the shadows. But I didn't. I was blind, wrapped in trust, living in a picture I thought was real. The truth was already there, recorded in Claire's trembling hands, waiting for the moment it would change everything. That night, after the fire had burned low and most of the kids were asleep in their tents, I sat on the edge of the blanket with Lily curled against me. Her little head rested on my lap, her cheeks warm from the day in the sun. The laughter of our friends drifted softly around us, mixed with the hum of crickets and the gentle lapping of the lake. I remember thinking how peaceful it all felt, how grateful I was for this ordinary kind of happiness. Then my phone buzzed. At first, I thought it was my mom checking in on Lily, maybe asking if we'd be home the next day. But when I pulled the phone from my pocket, I saw Claire's name. My heart didn't leap or panic. Why would it? I opened the message without hesitation. There was no text, no explanation, just a video file. I frowned, confused, and pressed play. The world shifted in an instant. On the screen, beneath the canopy of trees not far from where we had been laughing and cooking burgers, I saw my husband, Brian, his hands on another woman, his lips pressed to hers. Vanessa. The image was grainy in the half-light, but there was no mistaking his face, his posture, the way he leaned into her, as though he belonged to her. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My chest tightened, my vision blurred, and all I could hear was the pounding of blood in my ears. I replayed it once, then again, hoping, absurdly, that I had misunderstood. But the truth was undeniable. My husband, the man I trusted without question, the father of my child, was betraying me in the most intimate way. I felt the phone slip in my hands, my fingers trembling so badly I nearly dropped it onto the grass. My whole body shook as if the ground itself had given way. I pulled Lily closer without thinking, clutching her small frame against me as though she were the only anchor keeping me from collapsing. Tears stung my eyes before I even realized I was crying. 6 years of marriage, every memory, every promise, every moment we had built, it all cracked apart in the space of a few seconds of video. The man I thought was steady, reliable, mine was not mine at all. I stumbled away from the group, needing air, needing space, needing anything but the sound of my own heart breaking. My hands shook so violently I could barely type, but I managed to call Claire. When she answered, I couldn't form words at first. All that came out were gasps and sobs. Finally, I choked. Please, please get me out of here. I can't stay another minute. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the pain in it. I'll come. Just hold on. You don't have to face this alone. I hung up and sank onto a fallen log, my face buried in my hands. The night around me blurred into noise, the crackle of the dying fire, the faint laughter of people who still believed in the picture I had just lost. Inside, I was crumbling. In that moment, everything I thought I knew was gone. The trust one had carried like a shield, the love I had poured into my marriage, the life I had built brick by brick. It all collapsed in the shadow of that single truth, and that was the beginning of the end. I don't remember walking back from the woods. All I remember is clutching Lily in my arms, my phone burning in my pocket like it carried a piece of poison I couldn't shake off. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else, moving without direction, carrying me toward the small cabin by the lake where Brian and I were supposed to spend the night. He was already there when I opened the door. He looked up from where he sat at the table, his expression shifting the moment he saw my face. I must have been pale, trembling, eyes swollen from crying, because his body stiffened before I even spoke. Where were you? I whispered, my voice shaking. His lips parted, but no words came out. And in that silence I knew. He saw it in my eyes, too, the knowledge, the truth. I pulled the phone from my pocket, pressed play, and held it up. The video glowed in the dim light, his betrayal flickering across the screen. Brian's face drained of color. "Megan, please." He stood quickly, reaching for me, but I stepped back. Don't you dare touch me." He dropped to his knees then, his hands gripping the edge of the table, his voice breaking. "It was a mistake. Just one mistake. I swear to you, it didn't mean anything. You and Lily, you're my life." My chest ached so violently I thought I might break apart. A mistake? That's what you call it? Kissing another woman in the woods like a coward? Throwing away our family? My voice rose until it was nearly a scream. 6 years, Brian. 6 years, and you spit on all of it. He crawled closer, desperation etched in every line of his face. "Please, Megan, don't do this. Don't leave me. I'll end it. I'll never see her again. Just give me one more chance." Tears streamed down my face, but they weren't soft tears anymore. They were hot, burning, filled with rage. I shook my head violently. "No, you made your choice, and now I'm making mine. I will never forgive you." The sound of the door, creaking open, pulled my attention. It was Daniel. Claire must have called him after I broke down on the phone. He stood there, his jaw tight, eyes flicking from Brian kneeling on the floor to me clutching Lily. "You don't have to stay here tonight," Daniel said quietly, firmly. "Come on, Megan. I'll take you home." Brian turned toward him, anger flaring in his eyes. "Stay out of this. This is between my wife and me." But I had already decided. My voice was hoarse but steady. "No, Brian. It's not between us anymore. It's over." His face crumpled, his hands pressed together as though praying. "Megan, please. Don't break our family apart." I clutched Lily tighter, her small arms wrapped around my neck, her innocent breath against my shoulder. My answer came out sharp, final. "You broke it the moment you touched her. We're finished." I turned to Daniel, nodded once, and stepped past Brian without another glance. My heart was pounding, my knees nearly buckling, but I kept moving. Daniel took the bags from my hands, his presence steady, his silence more comforting than any words could have been. Behind me, Brian's voice cracked through the night. "Megan, please, don't do this." But I didn't stop. I didn't look back. For the first time since I had seen that video, my decision was clear. I was done. That night, in that cabin by the lake, my marriage ended. The next morning, I packed what I could and drove to my parents'. I couldn't sleep in that house another night. I didn't tell Brian I was leaving. I didn't need to. Everything I had seen the night before was reason enough. The days that followed felt like a blur. I packed Lily's clothes into a small suitcase and stayed with my parents for a while, needing the safety of their walls, their familiar voices. My mother busied herself in the kitchen. My father took Lily out for long walks, and I sat at the table staring at a cup of coffee that grew cold before I ever touched it. Brian tried to reach me. At first it was calls, dozens of them, my phone buzzing until I turned off. Then came the messages, long, frantic paragraphs, promises, apologies. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I only knew bits and pieces of what he was doing in those days. Claire told me she saw him outside our house once, sitting in his car, his face buried in his hands. Another time, she said he showed up at her place, begging her to convince me to talk to him. And then there were the texts, late-night confessions, slurred words that sounded more like anger than regret. "You ruined us by walking away. If you'd just forgive me, I'd change. Vanessa means nothing. You're my family." But then, just as quickly, there were messages that told another story. "Maybe I don't need you anyway. She understands me better than you ever did." It was as if he was tearing himself in two, bouncing between desperation and defiance, trying to convince himself he hadn't lost everything. I didn't see him with Vanessa again, not with my own eyes. But I heard whispers through friends, through social media, even from neighbors, that he was still meeting her, still clinging to what little comfort she offered. Maybe it was easier for him to run back to her than to face what he had destroyed. For me, there was no running. There was only the quiet weight of betrayal, pressing on me every morning when I woke up and every night when I closed my eyes. At first, it was unbearable. I cried until my body ached, until my throat was raw. But slowly, something shifted. I began to realize that the pain, as sharp as it was, couldn't break me unless I let it. I had Lily. I had her tiny hand reaching for mine, her voice calling me mommy, her laughter filling the empty spaces Brian had left behind. Every time I looked into her eyes, I knew I couldn't collapse, not completely. She needed me steady, and I needed to be strong enough for both of us. Brian did come to the door once. I remember the sound of his fists pounding against the wood, his voice cracking as he shouted my name. I stood inside, Lily pressed against my hip, my heart racing. I didn't open it. I couldn't bear to look at him, not when the image of that video was still seared into my mind. Eventually, his voice broke and the pounding stopped. I heard his footsteps retreat, the crunch of gravel under his shoes, and then silence. That silence was louder than his begging. It was final. In those moments, I realized something important. Brian's betrayal had shattered my trust, my marriage, the life I thought I had, but it hadn't shattered me. I was still standing. I was still breathing. And for the first time since everything fell apart, I felt the faintest trace of strength stirring inside me. It wasn't healing yet. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was resolve. And that was enough to take the next step forward. In the weeks after I left Brian, Daniel became a constant presence. At first, it was practical things, fixing the leaky faucet in my parents' kitchen, hauling boxes from the house Brian and I had shared, repairing Lily's bike chain when it slipped loose. But slowly, his help became something deeper. He was simply there, steady, quiet, a safe place to lean when everything around me still felt fragile. He never pushed, never asked questions I wasn't ready to answer. Some evenings, he'd sit on the porch with me while Lily played in the yard, the two of us sipping coffee in silence. Other times, he'd distract me with stories from his work or memories from his and Claire's childhood. His presence filled the empty spaces Brian had left without demanding anything in return. There was one night I'll never forget. It had been a long day. Lily had come down with a fever, and I'd barely slept. By the time Daniel stopped by to drop off some groceries Claire had sent, I was running on fumes. He noticed instantly, and without a word, he set the bags on the counter and started making tea. I sat at the kitchen table, exhausted, tears threatening again. He placed the cup in front of me and rested a hand gently on my shoulder. The warmth of that simple gesture undid me. For a moment, all I wanted was to collapse into his arms, to let someone else carry the weight I'd been holding. My body leaned forward almost instinctively. But before I could cross that line, Daniel pulled back. His voice was quiet but firm. "Megan, you've been through too much. You need space to heal, not someone new to hold on to." His restraint stung at first, but later, I realized it was the most respectful thing he could have done. He wasn't there to replace Brian. He wasn't there to be my savior. He was there because he cared, because he wanted to see me stand on my own again. That moment changed something inside me. I stopped feeling like a broken woman abandoned by her husband and started remembering that I was more than that. I was Lily's mother. I was someone who had endured betrayal and was still standing. The healing didn't come all at once. There were still mornings when I woke up aching for the life I thought I had. Nights when I reached across an empty bed and felt the sharp sting of absence. But little by little, those moments became less frequent. I found joy in small things again. Taking Lily to the farmer's market on Saturdays, baking muffins together in my mother's kitchen, hearing her laugh so hard she couldn't catch her breath. Those ordinary moments reminded me that life hadn't ended with Brian's betrayal. It was simply taking a new shape. Daniel kept showing up, not as a replacement, but as a reminder that kindness and respect still existed in the world. He was proof that not every man used love as a weapon, that trust could be rebuilt. Not immediately, not easily, but someday. Through it all, I began to rebuild my sense of self. I wasn't just the woman Brian had cheated on. I wasn't just a wife discarded. I was Megan Whitaker. I was stronger than I had ever known. And with every passing day, I was learning to live without him, learning to find peace in the life I still had. The day I walked into the courthouse to file for divorce, I felt no tears, no shaking hands, no desperate second-guessing, just calm. It was as though the storm had passed, leaving behind a strange stillness I had never known before. The clerk handed me the papers, asked me to confirm the details, and I signed my name with a steady hand. 6 years of marriage reduced to black ink on white paper. I thought I might crumble in that moment, but instead I felt lighter. Not happy, not yet, but free. Brian showed up once more after that, trying one last time to change my mind. He stood outside my parents' house, his voice hoarse from shouting, "Megan, please, don't do this. We can fix it. For Lily. For us." But there was nothing left to fix. The man who stood before me was a stranger, someone I no longer recognized. The love I had once felt had been hollowed out, replaced by something sharp and cold. I opened the door only long enough to tell him the truth. "You've already lost me, Brian. And you lost Lily the moment you chose yourself over this family. Go. There's nothing left here for you." His face crumpled, but I didn't waver. Eventually, he turned and walked away. That was the last time I saw him. In the weeks that followed, I heard whispers. He and Vanessa tried to make something of their relationship, but it fell apart almost as quickly as it had begun. She wasn't the love of his life, just the wreckage he clung to when everything else slipped through his fingers. When she was gone, he had nothing left. No wife, no daughter, no home that felt like his. Only the shell of the man he once pretended to be. For me, life began again. It wasn't glamorous or dramatic. It was quiet, ordinary, and that was exactly what I needed. I'd built routines for Lily and me, morning pancakes, bedtime stories, weekend trips to the park. She was my anchor, my reminder that love could still be pure, untouched by betrayal. I started working more hours at the design shop, saving up, planning for a future that belonged to us alone. I found joy in my independence, in knowing that every step forward was mine to take. Daniel remained a friend, a steady hand when I needed help, but he never pushed for more. He respected the pace of my healing, and in that respect, I found something even stronger than comfort. I found trust. Looking back, I realized something vital. Brian had taken my husband away, but he hadn't taken me. I hadn't lost myself. Through the tears, through the rage, through the nights I thought I might never feel whole again, I discovered a strength I didn't know I had. I did lose a marriage. I did lose the picture of family I once clung to. But I never lost my own worth, my own ability to stand tall. And in that, I found a different kind of victory. If there's one truth I carry with me now, it's this. Trust, once broken, cannot be mended the same way. Love, once betrayed, doesn't return to what it was. But sometimes the breaking is what sets you free. I may have lost a husband, but I gained something far more important. I gained myself, and that is a beginning I will never regret.